we have yet another grappler on this PFL fight card. I mean, come on, how many grapplers on this fight card? Oh my gosh. But we have Antônio Carlos Jr. and Tom Lawlor. This is a short notice fight. Tom Lawlor was supposed to be fighting Jordan Johnson. He ended up withdrawing from the fight. Now Antônio Carlos Jr. is stepping in on short notice in a light heavyweight fight right here. Antônio Carlos Jr. on a 3-fight losing streak. In the prime of his MMA career. Really tall and very, very lengthy. 79-inch reach. 6 foot 2 inches tall. And then 31 years old. Those are all into play. Humongous factors for Antônio Carlos Jr. in the fight. 10 wins and 5 losses, a lot of submissions and a lot of decision wins, 9 submission wins and 2 decision wins. Fought in the Ultimate Fighter. Which season was that? Brazil season 3. I believe he won that whole entire season inside the UFC. Went pretty up and down. Beat Marvin Vettori, who's about to get a title shot inside the UFC. I believe against Israel Adesanya. Beat Tim Boetsch, Jack Marshman, and Eric Spicely. But then, as you guys know, lost 3 fights in a row, all by decision. And then now is coming over to the PFL to fight Tom Lawlor, mainly a wrestler. 10 wins and 7 losses, a lot of finishes, 5 submission wins, 4 knockout wins, and 2 decision wins. So I think Tom Lawlor is going to be the wrestler in the fight, and Antônio Carlos Jr. is going to be the grappler in the fight. But Antônio Carlos Jr. very, very long and very, very lengthy, which is going to help him kind of close the distance a lot easier to get a takedown, get the fight in the clinch, and get on top of Tom Lawlor. But that's going to be very hard as well, because Tom Lawlor is also a wrestler here, so who knows how good a takedown defense Tom Lawlor will have in the fight. That is going to be helping Antônio Carlos Jr. in the grappling and wrestling department. Striking isn't really too good. His last 3 losses were to very, very good strikers like Brad Tavares, Uriah Hall, and Ian Heinisch, but he does make up for those striking disadvantages in the distance striking with the clinch strikes and the ground and pound strikes. 90% of his wins are submission wins, and most of them, and when I say most, are by rear naked choke submission. You look right here, rear naked guillotine. All right, let's see right here, guillotine. I mean, I don't even know where all the submissions at. I don't really know what's happening, bro, but pretty much every single one of the submissions are either by rear naked choke submission or guillotine choke submission. He gets you down and he tries to get your back and submit you in the first or second round. Yeah, but mainly guillotines and rear naked choke submissions. His takedown accuracy isn't really too good, but he was fighting some pretty good guys that had a very, very good takedown defense. Inside the UFC, like Uriah Hall, like Ian Heinisch, and then like Brad Tavares, so it's understandable like that. But Tom Lawlor is going to be the wrestler in the fight, as most of his wins, surprisingly, coming by submission, mainly by guillotine and rear naked choke submissions, just like Antônio Carlos Jr., which is very, very interesting. Has a takedown defense of 60%, which is very, very good as well. Pretty decent striking with some nice power as well. But I still think it's going to be very hard for him to kind of overcome the height and reach advantage from Antônio Carlos Jr. In the striking game right here. Has very good wrestling, but in this fight, I think it's just going to be who has the better wrestling. In my opinion, that the person that's going to have the better wrestling and grappling and submission skills will be Antônio Carlos Jr. I think Tom Lawlor is a little bit stronger than Antônio Carlos Jr., but Antônio Carlos Jr. is going to get the fight in the clinch, landed a lot of shots at the body, a lot of shots to the thigh, and then try to go for some takedowns on Tom Lawlor. I think this is mainly going to be a wrestling, grappling, submission, jiu-jitsu based fight. In the striking game, I'll give a slight advantage to Antônio Carlos Jr., considering he's going to have the high and reach advantage in the fight. I'll give the power advantage in the striking game to Tom Lawlor, the ground and pound advantage to Tom Lawlor, but everything else, in my opinion, goes to Antônio Carlos Jr., so I think in the fight, the striking game will be very even. I'll give the advantage to Antônio Carlos Jr. So honestly, the fight stays on the feet for the entire 3 rounds. I have Antônio Carlos Jr. winning the fight, but obviously there are going to be instances where this fight goes to the ground, and one of these 2 fighters gets a takedown. Not really too sure if Tom Lawlor is going to be the one going for the takedown, because he is a wrestler, but he is fighting a very, very good grappler in Antônio Carlos Jr., so we'll see what happens right here. But I think overall, Antônio Carlos Jr. has the better wrestling, the better grappling, the better striking, due to that high and reach advantage. So overall, I will be going with Antônio Carlos Jr. To go out there on short notice and go out there and win the fight by 30-27 unanimous decision.